I'll get out the TypeScript compiler codebase. This is the one file in memory here. It says function pass int, and then we have a string and the number. There are two special markers in here that are going to be used by the system that runs underneath this. So if you imagine this is like an integration level test for TypeScript. So it's basically saying, if I go to marker 2 here.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. This is so much more powerful than I realized. Here I was chugging away just highlighting things with the vscode extension or whatever. But wow, this is pretty powerful. And you're saying this is generalized in the sense that I could bring this into my documentation if I was I don't know, a Zod or a validator or something where I wanted to show my user what an error will look like. I can pull this package in and do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh wow.
You can do things like autocomplete. So this is the accurate autocomplete for Express. So during build on the CI, it imports Express into this because it's in my dependencies, and then it runs the actual query on SEN to see what it would get out of that.
Orta is super well known and super well loved for his work on the TypeScript team, doing things like the TypeScript handbook and also this thing Twoslash. So when he came on to talk about it, I thought it might be a pretty straightforward conversation, but he immediately opened up the TypeScript compiler code base and we started talking about all the different things that went into Twoslash being created. And there's also this thing Forslash, which is like a cousin of Twoslash. So there was a lot to it. Then he showed me all these other things you can do with it that I didn't know about. For instance, there's an inline syntax that's pretty new. There's a way to use it to do like drop-down auto-completion stuff. You can use it for adding little text annotations next to your code and documentation. And then we ended the conversation by talking about some efforts that are going on to generalize Twoslash to be used in any language. So imagine like Twoslash for Rust or Twoslash for Go. Anything could work, and it could be done with the language server protocol. So it was a kind of a consideration to add Twoslash to TypeScript itself, and I think they realized that actually it's bigger than TypeScript. So it's a pretty cutting edge technology, and it's great to have the people and the person in this case that is working on it come talk about it, and very excited to see where it leads in the future. So hope you enjoy. Let us know what you think.
Orta, great to have you here. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Orta Therox. I used to be on the TypeScript team, I guess about 2 years ago now. While I was there, I spent a lot of time focusing on sort of community interactions, ranging from documentation to definitely typed to sort of 1 or 2 compiler features, nothing too interesting, generally speaking, but like enough that I could do some damage within the code base, but also be able to use that knowledge to sort of help people understand and contribute to TypeScript, the code base, and TypeScript, the ecosystem.
Awesome. So, I mean, today we're here to talk about one such thing, Twoslash. So what was in your mind, or, I mean, you are, okay, let's get this straight first. You are the kind of like creator, I guess I don't know for certain, of Twoslash, right?
Well, yes and no, actually.
Okay.
maybe. Well, let's start at the start.
Okay, yeah, take us back.
The start of this is that I joined the TypeScript team, and one of the goals when I joined the TypeScript team was to redo the documentation. There was sort of the community thought that the handbook was nearly always very stale and missing a lot of content, and that a lot of the code samples didn't often work, and because it was a closed source repo, nobody could try and actually improve it. At least the documentation. You could make PRs to the handbook. And so when I came on board, we wanted to try and find a way to make sure that, you know, when we upgrade TypeScript version on the website, then we can verify that all of the TypeScript code samples would still run on the new one. And also to try and make it so that things like auto completions or showing, the types at a certain point inside the code would be something that we could offset all that stuff to the compiler. So the idea being like, what can we do to make it so that our code samples are really TypeScripty, and try to take TypeScript's concept of types for tools and build that in a static environment so that people can sort of have these web pages, investigate the actual code bases themselves, and each in a sort of isolated small file environment. And that's what sort of caused me to kind of come together with like, what is a single file format for describing an entire TypeScript project in one sort of small code sample in Markdown. And
so the idea is you would run it on the CI and like put all the docs code snippets through some program and then be able to get a yes, no answer to whether it's all good or not?
That's the goal. Yes.
Okay.
And so to do that, there's like a few different types of answers you can approach that with. The one that we settled on is obviously the one that became Twoslash. But the format and the syntax of that was something that like was up for debate at the time. And the key for us was actually taking the formats that we were already internally using. So if you've never contributed to the TypeScript compiler, the TypeScript compiler itself is, it's a normal JavaScript project as far as JavaScript projects go, but its testing suite is mostly integration level. There's probably like 2,000 or 3,000 unit tests, but there's probably about, last time I looked, there was about 60,000 sort of integration level tests.
Wow.
And those tests are like, there's two formats for those. There's one called Twoslash and there's one called 4slash.
Yes. There's also triple slash directives, right? It's a completely different thing.
Exactly.
Okay. You got it all covered.
So the rough gist between those two is that Twoslash is generally oriented towards tool-based integration types. So like I would like to be able to make a single text file and be able to say, hey, tell me what the autocompletes are at this position. Tell me what the hover information is here, and allow me to set these tsconfig variables. Whereas like 4slash is much more like, I want to build a full set of folders and I want to be able to annotate the code. And so the actual code lives inside 4 slashes. And so a 2slash file effectively looks and runs like a real TypeScript file, but a 4slash one doesn't. It has a lot of different mechanics. And so you see a lot of people write their tests in a bunch of 2slash files that look exactly like a normal single isolated TypeScript file, but can represent a more complicated, multi-file system. And so what I did was I took a lot of the good ideas that we had in the 2slash sort of side of the compiler test suite and started pulling those out and moving them into community infrastructure that anybody can start to use.
Interesting.
And built our code samples on that.
So the history of that actual syntax predates you joining the team, it sounds like.
Yeah, because I started making my own, and then I realized that there was a better one. There wasn't a better one. There was a more defined one that was sort of that had already been well built for making those tests. Oh, I understand. I remember now. 4slash tests are very interesting because the code samples live in these comments, but you can write your own evaluated code against those commented tests. So imagine you pre-pass the file for all 4slash comments, and that each one of those turns into their own little file, and then the code in the file that's not in the comments can make like.
Okay, I'm getting lost. I want to see this on paper. I just have one. I just have one question before we move on. In those days, you said that you mentioned there was a couple other things that you were thinking of. What were the other contenders for what could have become what 2slash is today? Like, what were the other trade-offs that you were choosing against?
Well, if you think about it, the level that I was working at was that for me, I was interested in Markdown part. Like it needed to live inside a Markdown file because that's how we're going to do documentation. So you could conceive, and my first like experiments were to have multiple Markdown like code blocks, and those code blocks would represent the set of files all together. And so instead of trying to jam everything into one single file by having like split syntax and things like that, you would make it so that you could reference between these different code blocks, and those together can turn into like a code sample. And so you could get a sense of some of the elegance of those, and if you're only doing a single file, then you could maybe find a way to make that work in a single mode. But once 2slash became the obvious winner, everything just got dropped away.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. That's cool to hear that though. All right. Could you show us some 4slash or 2slash or I don't know, 3slash, I guess might come up.
Yeah. Let's go. I'll get out the TypeScript compiler code base. The tests all live in a test folder. And if I recall, they live in cases. So here's 4slash, literally named for its own. So we've got add declare to function, right? Okay, this is a very short file. This is the one file in memory here. So we have a it says function pass int, and then we have a string and the number. There are two special markers in here that are going to be used by the system that runs underneath this. So if you imagine this is like an integration level test for TypeScript, and it's testing add declare to function. So it's basically saying, if I go to marker 2 here, and I delete, I assume this bit, so it will delete that, and then I go to marker 1, I think it's asking if I will insert declare at this point. Not 100% certain on all of these tests.
Add declare to function. Yeah, makes sense.
Right? And so maybe it was testing for, I mean, this is 8 years ago, so maybe this was testing for a crash when you actually included the word declare at the beginning, because this is a very old test. But that's what this does. So that's the general sense, right? You have these virtual files, and then you can, it has evaluated code underneath it that sort of acts a bit like an editor. Let's see if we can find a chunkier one. Add variable to constructor 1. All right, so that's
wow. Okay.
Let's go on. So this is the entire file. We've note that there's one cursor insertion point here. Right. So the first thing it does is it disables formatting. It then adds go to marker 1, and then it inserts this. So what this file will do then is what I would do then is I would take this file and I'd look in the baselines to see if there's a corresponding file for this. Let's see, test cases. Compile it. Is it in, all right, baselines reference. This file has 42,000 files in it. So that's probably why we couldn't find it in there. Maybe I need to open this in vscode, to be honest, because there's certain scaling problems with trying to interact with the TypeScript repo via GitHub.
For sure.
So that / test will generate a set of baselines basically. So it should tell it. There we go. It's just gotta go and find that file. And so then 2/ files all live inside the compiler. So you can see like very similar file format to what ended up becoming 2/, right? Except I preferred file instead of full file name, but I support both. And this would generate, what's this one called? Compiler options out and no omit. So compiler options. There we go, right.
Okay.
So it emits a few interesting files. So this is the file that we're looking at, and it's using 2/. So what they're effectively checking is that like skip lib check is true, and that we've got a lib and file name is complex. I'm not real like, right, this is some bug about how some complicated, very complicated types. Look how long this is.
Wow, 500 lines, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that it is testing is, this is integration level tests, right? Not unit level tests. So basically, when something changes now, we will see the types for every single part of every line. So in this case, we can see that T resolved to T, and the map here resolved to that. The mapper that represents there is resolved there. Value is here. Right now, they're all like being declared, but you'll see on each line, there's a corresponding version of every single type that is inside that individual file.
Interesting.
And so that's the sort of thing that, like, if anything within TypeScript changes, then like the inference changes on any of these files, then as a TypeScript compiler engineer, you'll see every single integration test where something has changed slightly.
You know, back in our TypeScript file, I'm kind of surprised because to me, 2/ is only exactly one thing where you go / caret, but these don't do that. And this is still, you're calling this 2/. So what other things are there in 2/?
Yeah. So the caret syntax is is tests. Did I entirely make that up? I don't think I made up that syntax myself. I feel like it comes in here, but it does seem to not be in the list. No results in TS excluding lib, which was fine. Tests. Yeah. I thought that I found this syntax from in here in a 2/ specifically. But maybe not, but these are definitely what we call, sorry, keep it big. These are what we call, I am adamant that there is a way. Let us search the tests. Files to include star.ts. Does this need like /star.ts?
You might also take away the slashes, because if it doesn't exactly match one white space.
Yeah. I don't know.
I feel equally confident that it's there. Yeah. Maybe if you took off files to include.
The what? Files to include?
Maybe,
right.
Yeah, just searched everything. I mean, oh, we're going to get regexes.
Yeah.
But there's still not that many.
Yeah, this just seems off to me. But yeah, I'm pretty adamant that feature came in. I mean, look at these tests. They're really, I mean, it's complex narrowing with any, so I'm sure it's complicated. But effectively, I'm really sure that I stole that idea from the compiler test suite.
Yeah, maybe it moved on to something else or something.
Yeah. So
then big picture, before we really go into the code, because I want to look at the // code now. So you arrive on the team to help with these kinds of things. You are looking at the docs, trying to find a way to make this more systematic so that between releases, the docs don't fall behind and become stale. You find this syntax, you weigh a couple other options, realize that the one that was already being used is actually a pretty good option if it could just be generalized a little more. You pull that out into a general library, and that's what we're going into now. Did I get it?
That is exactly. So the first thing I did then was I created the /npm module. The actual code for it's reasonably small. It's only three files. But I also had to sort of build out like VFS infrastructure and things like that in order for that to work out. Because the first thing you kind of need to do is make a virtual file system that represents the code. Good error message. Good error message handling is important. This is the sort of filter highlighting. Let's see if I can get the README out, and that's probably a good place to start. Because I need to show code samples. That's why they're not real code samples like this.
Yes.
We wanted to be able to do things like highlight a type, highlight the type for a type, be able to split these code samples down to not show parts of the code that's like setup versus actual code that you want to show. Here's my main features: handling multi-file imports, replacing things, and showing things like the .js for a particular file. Right? If you're thinking when I'm trying to document the tsconfig flags, what I really want to be doing is showing you like the aftermath of changing one of these files and just doing it bit by bit by bit. If you think like the target on the tsconfig, like when you're saying, I want to compile to ES5 or I want to compile to ES2017, like that's going to be a different JavaScript output. But it would be very ideal that what we provide is a TypeScript file and tell // to compile it down to JavaScript, but include this target level. And that was essential for documenting the tsconfig, which was just something I was still trying to do. So maybe I show you from an integration level, right? So if I take some of the docs, so like this example is a TypeScript, a // code sample.
Okay, so this is // here.
Yes.
But I don't see any // in front of me.
No. So let's go and find this file, right? Like first name Angela in the TypeScript code base. So this is what it looks like in reality. I am providing a little bit of extra settings specifically to set the theme for the homepage. I'm declaring ahead of time that this error 2339 is going to show, and that I have accepted that this error is part of this code sample. Which is this one basically when I hover, so that's where you get the number. And what that means then is that this code sample will run the TypeScript code in here. The because I have declared ahead of time that I want this code sample, it will actually embed it into the code itself. And so I never did anything for this code in theory. I just simply said that I want to be able to show this error message in this code sample, and Twoslash is the one that says, okay, so you want to here's a JSON dump of like the file, and here's the error message that came from it, and then you can sort of turn that into like something that can live in Markdown any way that you want.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, actually, because this is so much more powerful than I realized. Here I was, just chugging away using just highlighting things with the vscode extension or whatever. But wow, this is pretty powerful. And you're saying this is generalized in the sense that I could bring this into my documentation if I was I don't know, a Zod or a validator or something where I wanted to show my user what an error will look like. I can pull this package in and do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh wow.
You can do things like autocomplete. So this is the accurate autocomplete for Express. So during build on the CI, it imports Express into this because it's in my dependencies, and then it runs the actual query on SEN to see what it will get out of that. So I can find you this code too. It should just be right next to it now that I think about it. Show errors.
Yeah,
it's somewhere in here. What would this one be called? CFA interface React type definitions, maybe type definitions. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
right. So I declare that I don't want any errors. This is pretending to be a JavaScript file, and that I want ES module interop because that is how you can import Express in this format, and that's the entire code for that code sample.
Wow. So the // actual caret thing is not a question mark; it's a pipe on line 9 there.
Yeah. So, and the pipe represents, I want to see completions here.
Whoa, I had no idea about this. Okay. Here I was thinking I knew what I was talking about. Okay, that's really super cool.
Yeah. And it's what provides the mouse overs that you get in the TypeScript code samples.
Wow. Interesting. Can we look at this file as well, interfaces?
Interfaces, yeah, there should be basically nothing there. So it should just be an empty TS file, maybe. Oh, look, there we go. It's a little bit different, right?
Interesting.
So we have a single file that actually includes 2 declare functions at the beginning, and then we have this cut. So this is the idea that like the code above here is not relevant to the actual code sample we want to show, but it is essential that we have these available in order to like show the code sample without errors. And so this cut allows us to basically just write the code sample we want without having to do all the extra bits, like pretend to do an import or something like that.
Yeah, I have at least seen this before. This is kind of common in documentation. If you have something outside of the context of what you want to show, you don't want to overwhelm the user. Okay.
Exactly.
What was the last tab? There's a JSX. Okay.
JSX.
Is there anything special here with JSX?
I don't think so. If I recall, the JSX support is truly just, it's a native TypeScript support. JS doc versions of it too. TS TypeScript.
React. Probably, yeah.
That makes sense. And we just called it JSX. Like, there's not even a single // command in there.
Interesting.
So again, it's using this import. This import is using the TypeScript websites version of React. So it's a virtual file system that lives on, like, it's a fake virtual file system that lives on top of your current working directory. So if you did an import, then it will import from your local node modules, which means that I can reuse all my dependencies and get their like type definitions out of them straight away.
But on the browser.
Well, in the browser, it's a different ballgame, but I built support for that in the browser as well, because the browser in the playground, for example, does the autocomplete on that too. I guess another place, this is also // again. It shouldn't be too surprising, but like // my version of it actually includes giving you this stuff too. So these these side things actually are built into the code sample, believe it or not.
Wow.
Look, there it is.
// annotation text.
Yeah.
Huh. That's so cool. All right. So we have this,
Yeah.
I think it has sort of, I mean, Twoslash from where I'm sitting has sort of caught on quite a lot. I mean, it's a very common thing to see these days. And I think the VS Code extension is a big part of that. So, you know, it's like we have two worlds. The first world is the one we've been looking at, where we've seen a way to spruce up documentation and make it really easy to write interactive and beautiful documentation that expresses a certain thing. But then there's so tell us next about the VS Code part. What is, or like the debugging side of it?
Okay, so maybe
we'll come back to Shiki, or not, if you think, whatever.
The thing about all of them is they're also interconnected in a way that makes it hard to describe one about the others. I guess, so I needed all these I wanted these editor tools for the website, right? I wanted to be able to go to my TypeScript website and actually validate whether the Twoslash files, the Twoslash code samples in there were working. Because the way to think about it is that Twoslash is effectively a language on top of TypeScript, living entirely in code samples. And then Shiki is the bit that provides the user interface for it. So I've always sort of tried to describe it as like the commentary syntax that you have in Shiki is the Twoslash bit. And then when you want to ever use it, you would use Shiki via this module called Shiki Twoslash.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are not familiar, Shiki is a code formatter. So you give it plain text and you say, this is JavaScript, and it will give it back to you with like colors and stuff so you can show it on documentation with all the colors. Okay.
Exactly. It was made by a member of the VS Code team for the VS Code website, where their goal was to reuse all of the VS Code like JavaScript runtime infrastructure to recreate the exact like experience of syntax highlighting on the web, which honestly didn't really exist before then. Like everyone else was still trying to implement all of these things separately from how it's done in editors. And so basically what we did with Shiki and Twoslash was bring them together and be like, here's the exact like editor experience of TypeScript and here's the exact editor experience of VS Code. And we jam those together to make them into like these code samples that are just like unbelievably tight.
And Shiki has gained quite a lot of popularity in recent days and years. I think it's a top contender now. So it's pretty exciting.
It's big in the Vue community for sure. And it's big in the React one too. And so honestly, I was looking at the problem originally from the prospect of the TypeScript playground, because we were all trying to solve the problem of how do we make it so that you don't have to hover on these things to be able to highlight to other people what the most interesting part of the playground is to somebody else. And that is how eventually we came to the conclusion that we should support Twoslash comments in the playground. Like, it was not that we ported the actual implementation of Twoslash into the playground, but that we started taking some of the language features from Twoslash and moved them into the playground. And then once I did that, people were like, well, why can't I do it in my editor? And I had to send a PR over to the VS Code team to be able to have other VS Code extensions talk to the TypeScript VS Code extension, which comes bundled, so you don't normally think of it as like that.
Interesting.
In order to make requests to be able to ask for these sorts of values.
I have a little selfish sidebar. So we did on the Michigan TypeScript Challenge. I say those words together so often I can't separate them. We did on the Michigan TypeScript channel all of the type challenges, and the thumbnails and the kind of intro for those type challenges uses the Twoslash extension, except I forked it and like played with it so that I could get it to look elsewhere for what the value is that it puts in there because some of them are like, I only have like 12 characters or 18 characters to show what I want to show, and I can't have this big long thing, so I needed to be able to tell it. And then I just recorded my screen and just hit backspace a bunch of times, and so it had like a really nice effect of like looking like it looks in an editor. But anyway, but I have seen it, and it's really, I think people should check it out because it's not it's not a hefty amount of code. It's basically one file for the VS Code extension. And it's a real testament to how modular is. I mean, I'm saying this, I guess, in part to say that I can attest myself to how modularized Twoslash is, because there's not much that you needed to do to make the extension happen today. Maybe I know there's that PR you said, but that's super cool.
No, that's just infrastructure though. Now anybody can make now it's very advantageous for anybody to be able to talk to the TypeScript TS server, basically. That was the goal. And anybody making an extension now can do that, which is super useful.
I'd like to ask about that part, actually, specifically with I think it's called Quick Info is the API on the TypeScript server. Or maybe could we look at the code for the VS Code extension? That would be a cool thing.
So it got a bit bigger recently because I decided recently to accept 1 or 2 new PRs. But I think it still largely lives in 2 files now. So the real work that was necessary is to do this inlay hints provider. That was most of the work, which is the bit that shows the little bit of the chunky bit of text that lives after your thing, this bit.
Yep.
Otherwise, prior to this, it was just like a very simple regular expression that I think it still is a simple regular expression. But the rough gist is that we register a hints inlay provider. So every now and again, VS Code will send you a message saying, hey, this text has changed at this sort of range, and that will affect your current inlay hint. Would you like to decide if you still need it there or not? That's why it usually takes a little bit of time for them to come and go.
Okay.
And that's with all extensions, because all this stuff is asynchronous. So what do? We have 2 regular expressions. So there's the inline query regex, which should just be, there it is. So unlike the first version of Twoslash, where it's like a pretty good parser of a comment to try and pull out all this really rich information, the version that's used in the VS Code extension truly does just run a regular expression looking for the symbol that is like the hat. And I allowed support for this string. So, a comment with equals something. So it could be on the same line, basically. And then it would put it at the end there too.
Wait, show me the equals, the little happy arrow. Face. Yeah, what is the arrow? What does that do?
So if I did it if I did something like, can I edit this? I'll just do it in this. I don't know if I've got it installed in this computer. It's pretty new. So if I wrote this, const hello equals super, and then I did hello comment, and it would fill out here 76776. So the idea is that sometimes it can be hard to get to the specific thing that you're looking for, either because you've got A.
I've hit this with functions. If I want to use Twoslash on a function, but the next line under the function is actually like there's a bunch of arguments, so the next line is an argument, not the end of the function because it's regular. Yeah, that's very cool. So the caret pipe syntax that we saw for autocomplete before on the docs is not in the Twoslash queries VS Code extension.
No, and it's not in the playground either. I mean, it could have been in the playground, but it would be. I don't think it would be too useful in the playground.
Wow. Okay. Huh.
So that's like a subset of Twoslash.
Interesting. So, all right. So then this is how it works. But the actual API that it gets, what I wanted to ask about is the decision behind what the inlay hint contains. Because, I mean, I'm not complaining, okay, but I have sometimes been annoyed that it will put the name of the thing in the inlay hint, and it's like, I can see the name, I don't need the name there. Yeah, I just want the type.
That's actually a good argument. We could maybe look and see if the identifier that we have selected, right? We know what you're highlighted, and remove that. If it says like const blah blah blah, we could just check that same line and remove it. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely something that we could do. But that does come from TypeScript, and so a lot of that comes to what is TypeScript's type printer internally. And how does that type printer decide to print your types at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
and they often choose to include as much information as possible, and that often includes the declaration of it too. But I would be surprised if you could remove it.
Well, I mean, what's interesting to me is that sometimes I hear complaints from people. Actually, Michigan TypeScript just had a in-person event yesterday about generated versus inferred types for like schema definitions. And it was a great talk, but the author gave one of the cons. I was really, because I'm like, I can see from both sides. I think there's a use for both of those things. And one of the cons that he listed for infer types was that you get all this other stuff. Like you get like generic that has a generic that has a generic that has a generic that has a generic, and it just goes and goes and goes. And like, I just want to see it says like first name, string, age, number, or whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't want to see all that stuff. I'm going to ask you this question because nobody seems to remember, and I'm wondering if I'm in a parallel universe. Years ago, I recall in VS Code, if you hover over type, you could hold Shift or like Alt or Control or something, and it would show you like the final compiled interface of the thing that you're hovered over, not like all the generics nested inside. Does this ring a bell to you?
Only lightly. I feel there was a separate mode for doing it, but I don't remember them.
This is like TypeScript 1.0 days. Well,
yeah, I was doing that. Yeah.
I guess the thing that I'm curious about is if somebody wanted to change Twoslash in terms of what's rendered inside of those inlay hints, there doesn't seem like there's a really easy way to do that, because that depends on, you, like you said, you just get the info from the compiler and the compiler has what it has. You would have to make a PR on TypeScript to accomplish that, right? To change something in Twoslash like that?
At that heart, yes, but also slightly no. Like, we choose to display the exact text that they give, but there's some reasonably rich text, reasonably rich information in there. Not enough to print your own version of the type, but maybe enough to show like secondary bits of information that could be useful from this sort of request to the TypeScript TS server.
Interesting.
Not to go off on a tangent, but one of my like most recent sort of side projects has been to sort of try expand on TypeScript's error message handling. Basically, I was looking at this problem where TypeScript error messages sort of end up in these kind of pyramids of types because they don't have a name at a certain point. And I was trying to figure out other ways to be able to display these types in different ways, so we could sort of put them side by side effectively, and that would make maybe for easier to read and understand error messages. So you could say this is not this, and we can say, hey, this object inside this one is not the same as this, and it would be very obvious that 1, 2, 3 does not equal string.
Yes.
But the only way that you can actually do that internally is if you actually have a new type printer in the system that is built for this sort of side-by-side analysis. And so if it is something somebody is actually interested in trying to like dive deep into, this repo, TS2322 workshop, is the process of trying to actually create a new internal code printer. I think that's what they call it. Wow. Just sort of trying to print both of these nodes of TypeScript's types, and trying to decide. I know it's all very workshoppy, as it says in the name, but this sort of iterating through what TypeScript thinks the types are and trying to get to a point where it prints out in a reasonable way. That's a place to learn about how to do some of the printing.
It seems like a big job though, but I guess, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to doing it. I think there was a package, I'm not going to forget the name, but there was a package that was announced recently, or that somebody made to like make the errors look prettier, and it got quite a lot of interest from people, it seemed like. Is this something that you think Twoslash could be a part of?
No, I think that the end result of something like this would then be usable by Twoslash in these shorter like versions of the thing, of the inferred information. This has to be like the tweet equivalent of a blog post, because you're only allowed to be able to do it in about 160 characters, because you can't have multi-lines on these types of inline messages, and so you really have to be very terse in what your type looks like.
Let me ask that. I have a more specific way of phrasing that. Do you think that showing errors, like the way that you showed me on the docs, do you think that in the future there could be a way that Twoslash gets utilized to be able to demonstrate errors, like kind of like you see here, but with Twoslash?
Maybe, yeah. Oh, I see. Right, yeah. So VS Code does not have an inline multi-line API. Mm-hmm. So if it did, then yes, it would. Like, do you have a sense of when this is coming out?
I'm kind of making it up, so never.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm just trying to understand like where this could go in the future. You know, hopefully we can inspire people to see. I mean, TypeScript is great in many ways. I think probably everyone that has used other languages can agree that maybe displaying errors is not the greatest part of TypeScript. I have can you find in your ping.gg chat, I sent you this is sure to generate a laugh.
Yeah. I hope it's a big
So there are a couple times when we did the challenges where we saw this kind of thing, and you know, it's always like generics. If you hover over the generic in process, you can get this big expansive mess of things. I have a couple like that. I realized I should tweet the rest of them. There are a couple that I've saved, but all the same, I mean, I have to say I'm pretty jazzed about the potential of something like Twoslash. Do you think that there's a way that Twoslash would ever be a part of TypeScript itself?
Oh, wow. It's like you're primed for going through my to-do list on this.
Okay.
I after getting a lot of feature requests to the Twoslash VS Code plugin, the Twoslash queries, I asked myself that question, actually. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I should ask TypeScript that question too. And we sort of backed and forth a lot of it, because I was like, all right, this I think should be a feature at TypeScript, I think, because I also felt like more and more people were using it. A lot of people I would see videos like yours and everybody's asking in the comments, how do you get it? And it was like, why don't we just move it into TS Server?
Yeah, and it's not just me, by the way. I mean, I think like you could look at videos from Matt Pocock. Yeah. I mean, it's like every video, people saying, "What's that thing? What's that thing?" Even though, by the way, Matt has made a fantastic little short primer video on Twoslash and what it is. He still gets that question constantly. I get it as well, and so I think like there's a strong case in my mind to be made. But I didn't know about this issue. Okay, all the way in February. All right. So what's the result? Scroll to the bottom.
Scroll to the bottom. So it was chatting with Daniel and what's that, Jake? Eventually I got I feel like I got no, I guess not. All right. The rough gist is we think that this actually should live at VS Code level, and that this should be generalizable to every single language, basically. Because the abstraction that I was looking for is that I thought, hey, I'll talk to TS Server directly. But it turns out that with this line of code, I can do it to any language in an editor. And so I could take this Twoslash_queries VS Code extension, and I can just turn it around, use this API instead, and now I can do it on any language. And so then why don't we try and think of a way of sort of building that natively into VS Code so that it works on every language using this syntax? And so I have to finally make a pitch to the VS Code team via an issue, probably, saying like, I think this is a feature that should be added at VS Code level to every single thing.
Every single thing that supports / comments.
But at VS Code level, they also know what the comments look like. So a VS Code extension doesn't have to, but will nearly always describe how to create a comment, because if you do command /, that will always put a comment in any language. And so that's part of the VS Code API for implementing a language, is describing how to make a comment. And so we could have a check that if it's inside what the language considers to be a comment, then we can see if it's got the caret and the question mark. And if it is, then we run this bit of code, which will send the same message that will eventually be the TypeScript TS server equivalent. Wow. And then it can be like an inline feature. And so if you wanted to do something that's a bit like these TypeScript, multi-line things, like if you wanted to do that on the error, for example, then that would be very trivial to do because it's now at VS Code level, and VS Code has a more privileged access to making, UI Chrome. And so that's that was the outcome of this thing, not a clever close.
Interesting.
We don't need it. Or that this is bigger than TypeScript. You just have to push it.
So in the future, that means that in 2025, somebody might install VS Code, open up a TypeScript file, and Twoslash will be working without an extension, but not because it's a feature of TypeScript itself, but because it's a feature of VS Code.
Exactly. Yeah. And somebody does the same on Rust, and they open up their Rust file, and there's a Rust comment, and that has the same syntax.
Interesting. Wow. How do you feel about that? I could see it both ways. I think it should. It's weird because there's a way in which the VS Code solution path becomes very self-serving because you have Vim users, and I think anytime somebody sees there is a crowd of people who, when they see editor-specific files in a repo, get hot under the collar, and the problem is that in my opinion, Twoslash is a part of TypeScript now. It is already a de facto part of TypeScript because it's very difficult to do modern TypeScript development and never come across Twoslash. I don't think it adds any weight. It doesn't change any language semantics, so it's easy to add a thing like Twoslash. But what about Vim? What about Emacs? What about Notepad++? I don't know who else I'm supposed to service in this sentence, but. Yeah. What would this mean if you added this? This would be added at the LSP, the language server protocol level, and not necessarily just the VS Code. Is that it?
This message here is an LSP message at the end of the day. And so in theory, this could be implemented at the LSP provider, not at the LSP server level. So if you think TS server is an LSP-ish thing for TypeScript, and the same exists for every language. And so if we just say this is the normal LSP message, then any editor can just implement it. But yeah, that is the biggest downside of moving it to VS Code level. But on the flip side, that's, it's like supporting Windows. It's basically everyone except the people that it isn't. Yeah.
That would be very interesting. And I guess it says, Jake said here that, supporting NeoVim and et cetera. Wow. Okay. Well, I think that's definitely going to be exciting to see when this happens. So how far up on your to-do list is this?
Not very high. I made a new version of the extension, so I feel pretty good about that. But realistically, I forget about this until somebody writes an issue, and then I'm like, oh yeah. Because I don't write that many complicated types because most of the time I'm only working with myself and one or two other people. And like the scale of the code bases don't necessarily need those types of types.
When you're a library author, servicing potentially thousands of people, then it's like these things have a different risk-reward ratio to them than if you're developing local code, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. When I rewrote the TypeScript handbook, when I finished writing the TypeScript handbook is maybe the right way to frame this, I realized that I'd come upon the right metaphor for talking about TypeScript's like language features. Because originally TypeScript used to frame itself in there is basic TypeScript and there is advanced TypeScript. And you'd get all these people that were like absolutely deathly afraid of the advanced page of TypeScript that just covered all of the generics and things like that. And then I tried to reframe it as like, how did I reframe? I framed it pretty in a way that's a little bit like that. Right. I framed it as type manipulation, right? Like there's the sort of the overview of everyday TypeScript, and then you come to type manipulation. So like, how do you create type some of a type, and things like that. What we would consider to be like reasonably advanced type manipulation stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think now how I think about it is that there is types for apps, and then types for libraries, and then types for describing complicated JavaScript.
Wow.
And those are the 3 types of things that we have in TypeScript. And if I'd have had that framing from the beginning of the handbook, version 2, if I'm ever asked to rewrite it, that is how I would frame it.
I love that. I have been saying the third one is one that I don't think about as much, but I've been saying that a lot to people, is that it's like that's kind of the number 2 on your list is kind of what this channel is for. It's like there's like the kind of TypeScript that you write when you're making libraries is pretty different. And I mean, actually, Mike Potat, one of the people who did he does this higher kind of types HKT tool belt library.
Yeah.
And,
I know that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Mike, we were looking at some code on one of the videos a while back, and he made this comment that I thought was glorious, which he said, calling this TypeScript is almost a stretch. And it's like, sometimes it can really be that way. The problem is that I think people from both sides of it kind of fail to see sometimes each other's perspective, because the reason that this code exists in libraries that's very complicated and many nested generics and all these things is because it has to, because to provide a super fantastic user experience in the end where everything is inferred and you don't have to know or think about it, you got to do that work. You got to push that work somewhere. If you're going to take it away from the user, you have to take it on as a library. But then when it's generalized, it's like way harder.
It's like, whoa. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. People, it's nothing against Theo, but Theo Brown, Theo Ping.gg, the Twitch guy. He came on and did some challenges with us and kind of ragged on, I think I had him do Fibonacci sequence was one of the ones that we did. Maybe I was prodding him in some way, but the comments were, I think people are frustrated with him saying, this is ridiculous. This code is not.
I would say this,
Right. But I think what's actually interesting about his reaction is Theo is unquestionably an extremely talented developer. Like, he's not an idiot. He knows what he's talking about. Why does he react so negatively to seeing this code on the other side? I sat down with Dan Vanderkam and Josh Goldberg and other people and showed them the exact same kind of stuff, and they just went, sure. Yeah, totally. They had no negative reaction. And I think it's because Theo is a maker on the other. I mean, Theo has definitely made many libraries. But he's making products that people pay for, that people use, and he thinks through that lens. And to him, this kind of code is like absolutely bad. It should not be in your code base. And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. Yeah.
In an app code base, it doesn't belong. But in a library code base, Theo loves TRPC. If you go look at TRPC, you're going to find this kind of stuff. Go look at the code base of Zod. You're going to find this code in Zod, this kind of this like type 2 application developer stuff, or library developer stuff. So wow, I'm so that's cool. Sorry to monologue, but it's just cool to see somebody else describe it that way, because I feel so similarly. There's a lot of work to be done, I think, on the other side of the fence. Like we're talking, like the handbook doesn't exist for the people that are library authors, really.
No, it definitely doesn't. We attempted some bits with that with reference, but the handbook is explicitly not trying to really target those people too much, because it's politely going to scare people off. Like, we'll go lightly into like conditionals and these sorts of things that you could maybe see living in a lib folder in your application. But the issues are the true source of truth, unfortunately, for some of the really gnarly types that people end up writing.
I hear that. Well, cool. I mean, we covered a lot. Is there anything that we missed? I mean, we talked a lot about so many different areas of Twoslash, its history, how it's used, where it comes from. Could you show us, actually, there's a lot of different, there's like all these different ways that you can incorporate it. There's Docusaurus, and could you show us all the different ways that we can use Twoslash in site generators? I guess that's the one thing we didn't cover.
Yeah. So first of all, the API reference for Twoslash lives inside a playground that basically gives you a way to sort of preview all of them. Sorry, I don't know how well it'll zoom in, but basically it's like it's like a version of the playground that has all these 2slash examples and shows you what they look like when you take the code sample and turn it into like the full version. So like here's what happens when you want to show logs and things like that inside it. I use this on the TC39 types as comments proposal, but hopefully you're very excited about that. I'm very excited about it.
Well, not really, actually. Well, maybe we can talk about that another time. I don't know why. I guess I'm not with the times because the team is. I mean, everybody seems excited about this, but I mean, the quickest way I can say it is I think that we have seen such extreme progress in such a short amount of time with TypeScript, and I think that that's largely due to the fact of TypeScript not being in the ECMA standard. And
right, it's not, but this won't be.
Sure.
Sorry, you might understand it.
I just worry. I worry that as the more and more things that are type related find their way into JavaScript, it puts a boundary that's really hard to ever go past ever again on what can be done in TypeScript. And I don't think that TypeScript is done. I think that in 5 years, it actually might be. You know, it's like it's already one of the most advanced type systems in the world. There's plenty left to do, but like I don't think we're like decades away from TypeScript being like pretty good for everything that it can be, given that JavaScript is what's running underneath. Forking TypeScript into its own thing where you execute actual TypeScript and you're not compiling to JavaScript and executing that would be the only other step beyond to go to farther reaches of the universe. But until that, I don't think that's in the cards really. But so I love the progress that TypeScript has.
Yeah, I actually gave a talk while I was working on TypeScript about why that's not possible.
Oh, really? I would love to see if you can show us that talk.
So what's this? YouTube, Therox. It's like mal TypeScript, was it? Like I was trying to figure out like how does TypeScript not what constraints there? How does the TypeScript team try to avoid negative effects on the JavaScript ecosystem, which actually does talk into the idea of like, what does it look like to try and do our own runtime, which is here. The rough gist is that everyone would get annoyed, because like, you know, a lot of people consider themselves JavaScript engineers, and a lot of the long-term goals is to make sure that JavaScript stays the I love
this. I love this. What it paused on, by the way.
But it's a pretty good one on this one, and gives into an example of somebody who has done that, and that is Microsoft. This is an implementation of I can't zoom in on it really, but there is a runtime implementation of TypeScript made by Microsoft called Static TypeScript. It is pretty good, and it is for running on small hardware.
Interesting.
So this talk does try to talk about that specifically.
Wow. Cool.
Which is what I read. But rough gist is, I don't think that's what would happen with TypeScript. I think there'll always be a .ts file. And so the .ts file will always have the types of interesting syntax and things that you're talking about. But there will also be a version that acts a lot like JSDoc inside the existing structure of a JavaScript file. So the specification that says like, you know, the thing where types are allowed in here is about as flexible as a JSDoc comment is, which means, and right now every feature more or less is available in JSDoc that's available in a TypeScript file. Generally, I know that there's not some that are not, but you know, a lot of people said, well, what about adding satisfies, which is a very recent feature, and we found a way to get that into JSDoc. And so really? I think it's I can't remember the exact syntax, but it might be in the JSDoc reference in the website.
Interesting.
And so it's likely to be that it should be okay for that sort of problem.
Wow. All right. Well, I mean, Twoslash has a bright future ahead of it, I feel like. Is there anything that you would like to see done? I mean, you said you have a bit of a laundry list. Like, what would be the most exciting thing that we did or didn't talk about, I suppose, look, you got Gatsby, Docusaurus, ViewPress, lots of things.
I went and commissioned an artist to take all of their logos and turn them into these oldie worldy ones to make it fit with the aesthetics of the webpage.
I love the look. I forgot to mention, I love the look of this webpage, by the way. It's so unique and so cool. Yeah.
I think it's a really good feel, right? Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think about Twoslash very often anymore.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a very fun project for me. It does a really great job of running the TypeScript website, and the fact that the TypeScript website hasn't really been updated in the last since I left, and that all the code samples are still accurate and things like that is a testament to like the tooling foundation that it has. And I think Twoslash plays a very, very large part of that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
cool.
It's a good tool.
Well, thank you for making it. I mean, thank you for pushing it forward. It sounds like there's a couple people involved here, but I mean, definitely, if you don't mind me, you're the Twoslash guy. I don't think we would have this like it is if it wasn't for your efforts. And I can tell you that for me personally, it's made me much more productive. The debugging capabilities of it have really given me time back of my life. So thank you for that. I'm sure I'm not alone. And I look forward to what you do in the future. You're a pretty productive guy, so I'm sure there will be more coming from you down the road.
Yeah, definitely.
No pressure.
Once I get time to do side projects again, although I'm still trying to figure out these TypeScript error messages. I think that would be a incredibly impactful one if I can really prove that idea out and get it in.
Most of the code that I write is actually Rust the last year or so. And
nice.
When I go back and forth, that is the number one thing. I mean, there's like soundness and other things. You have to switch your brain a little bit, but the Rust error messages are so good. And it's a big difference from like, oh, okay, I'm in TypeScript. I have to like scroll to the bottom and then like read up from the bottom. And it's like, I would love it if TypeScript's error messages improved, but I shouldn't say that because I don't really know how to improve them. I haven't thought deeply enough about it. So maybe I should shut my mouth. But
well, everybody's allowed to complain about it. It's just if it was easy, it would have been done already, right? And that's the hard bit. And so far I've only seen like two really solid, firm attacks on that problem that have not managed to get all the way through. One is one of the TypeScript compiler engineers, Wes Wiggum, made an interactive version of the error messages. So like in VS Code, you can sort of dive into them bit by bit.
Interesting. Okay.
Open and close. But that got tested at like VS Code user testings, and nobody understood how to the error messages could be interactive and kept failing every user test that it was applied to. And so no one can figure out how to get that to work.
Have you ever heard of the study done many years ago? It's like a user experience thing I've heard where, toothpaste caps used to always twist off. But somebody eventually wanted to make like a pop open toothpaste cap. And they did this user testing, and like people were like twisting this cap, and it just never came off. They're just like, something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong with the cap. It won't come off. And they're like, no, it just pops off. And it took a long time for people to, you have that inbuilt knowledge of like, oh yeah, like you said, error messages are not interactive. So why would I even try to interact with them? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the second attempt?
Well, that's my attempt.
Okay.
So that proposal, this bit of text, Anders has seen this and has like not signed off on it, but signed off that this could be feasible if I put a lot of time into it. So it just has to be implemented in many ways and proven out with a lot of error messages. So all of my projects right now run a TypeScript fork with some of these things enabled on my repos as I increment and work on TypeScript error messages that I get.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I will look forward to this RFC in the future, and I'll subscribe. Can you subscribe to a gist? I guess maybe there's a way.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So I'll find it. I'll link these things in the video anyway, if anyone is interested. And well, even if you do forget about Twoslash, thank you for your effort on it again. And it'll be here for everyone, even though, even if it doesn't change, I'm happy with what it is today. So that's fantastic. Okay, well, thanks again for coming on, and look forward to hearing from you for other projects. You have many other projects, so we'll definitely be getting after you for that.
Yes, I am always doing something, although I managed to lose our tab. So yes, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. The documentation is a frequent thing that comes up on the people that I hang out with, just because so much of the stuff that we're doing is very deeply, it's very fully undocumented. I mean, some of it is like maybe relying on bugs and things, so maybe it's not a bad thing that it's undocumented, because like, people shouldn't be doing this kind of shit. But like, there's like the 0 extends 1 thing. I don't know if you know about that. There's all these other like little tricks that
like to give the string auto completion for sets of things.
Yeah.